Right, remember Marikana? I'm sure you do. Exactly 9 years ago, South Africans were horrified to see a live massacre of workers in an event that has gone down as one of the darkest moments in the country's democratic history. Surviving families of the slain mine workers have relentlessly sought justice. In vain, Advocate Dali Mpofu, who represented the families of some mine workers who died in the massacre, says that the tragedy will forever be part of South Africa's dark history. He joins us now to reflect on the significance of the events. Advocate, it's an absolute pleasure this morning. It's as much as it might be a pleasure to talk to you, it's quite sad that it's only around this time that these conversations come back up and still no justice, Advocate.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. That is indeed very sad. I think that even those of us who knew that the government was quite reluctant to assist the victims did not think that it will almost be 10 years when some of them are still waiting for any form of compensation. And yes, indeed, although it is not the best situation that we have to only think about this around the 16th of August. But at the same time, as we said recently, we commend AMCU and some of the victims for even making sure that every year there is this commemoration, because otherwise we would have forgotten all by now. It would have been a distant memory.
Absolutely, Advocate, because government don't seem to be commemorating or doing much to remember this event. And of course, there are certain theories behind that. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, I think that it's partly it must be the shame of having what we call the first massacre of that scale under democratic rule, as you said in your summary. But even then, one would have thought that by now, you might remember that I think in 2016, there was a big hullabaloo that was made about trying to settle this matter. And it was at the time when the government did concede, by the way, liability for having done the wrong thing around the massacre. And so that was a very good and positive step, which the victims welcomed. And one would have thought then, I think that was the beginning of 2016. We all thought by the end of that year, therefore, once they've considered the wrongdoing, they would have finalized with the compensation. And now we're almost 5 years after that. And so it's really impossible to determine, because it can be a question of money. My rough estimation, this is very rough, is that it would cost them maybe the total compensation package around about 500 million or so. So I can't understand why no Minister of Finance has said in each budget, let's just deal with this matter once and for all. And then at least we can worry about apologies and recognition, as you say, and other things like that. But at least the monetary compensation should have been long resolved.
I mean, it really should have been, Advocate. It's 9 years later, and we're still sitting in a situation where we're wondering, what next for these families. Their lives are still changed forever, while other lives go on. And I know you've been representing them. You've also asked for the review or the recommendations from the Farlam Commission to be set aside. So a lot of corrections to what's happened since the massacre is what you're looking for, but even that is not coming at the moment. Where are you in the process of getting some form of, I want to call it retribution for these families in terms of the law?
Well, of the groups that I do represent, the only group that has been fully compensated is the group of people who were arrested. We call them arrested and injured. But, and that was the large group, if you remember, that we had to ask for bail for right at the beginning. The irony is that the people who had serious injuries, of which there are about more than between 40 and 50, some of them quite serious life-changing injuries, are the ones who have not yet been compensated. In other words, they started by compensating the people who really were paid little amounts, although there were many in number. And the seriously injured still remain uncompensated. And as you know, some of those people, age is catching up. Some have passed on. There's now COVID. We're even fearing that we might have more people passing on. It's just another tragedy, what is being done in the area of compensation, or rather what is not being done.
I mean, it's like a tragedy following on a tragedy, as you rightfully say, Advocate, where we know where the blame lies. We know what the Farlam Commission inquiry has said. Just talk to me again, maybe jot some of our memories who might not remember what your problem was with those recommendations and what the actual recommendations are that you'd be looking for.
Well, yes, let me do it in two parts. Even the Farlam recommendations, which, as you correctly point out, we found very problematic, have not been implemented, and that is part of the problem. I mean, some of the recommendations were around policing methods. Some of them were about identifying specific individuals. There have been a couple of policemen who have been charged. I think only one of those cases was completed. There's another one that's ongoing now. But even that is going at a snail pace that you can't even imagine. And there are still a number of people, some of whom gave evidence which implicated them directly, who are still at large. I don't even know if they are still with the police or they are still alive. But some of those people that we had identified as the perpetrators, let alone the shooters, we differentiated between the masterminds, the senior police who planned this thing, and those who actually pulled the trigger. But even those who pulled the trigger have not yet been properly identified. And you would find that must be strange to anybody. If the police cannot identify, I mean, well, even children know that if you fire a police firearm, you have to go and report as to what happened to the ammunition that you were given. So it should have been the easiest thing to identify the people who pulled the trigger. And then, of course, there's another level of the political masterminds. We had recordings. We were lucky enough to have recordings of people who were planning, basically, what they called D-Day. And that's higher up in the value chain. So those people have also not been prosecuted. We don't even know if they are being investigated.
Advocate, we actually have run out of time, but I really just want to ask you this question. I mean, it's 9 years on, we're still sitting here. My fear is that 9 years on from today, we'll still be here. How do we solve this as soon as possible?
Well, one of the things I said to the victims when I saw them this week was that, look, we have to find some kind of strategy so that at the very least, the issue that you raised, we raise public awareness around this issue. We don't only talk about it around August, and we must make sure that we certainly will not, at least that's the pledge I made to them, will not reach the 10-year mark without some of these issues either being resolved or being highlighted, and making sure that the public, that the media, everyone actually assists these people. I mean, there's no reason why they cannot even say to some of the victims who are destitute, we will, and in respect of whom they've already accepted liability, they could say, we will give you an interim payment, and then when the actual amount is determined, we will deduct. That is something that is done in law in respect of road accident funds and those kinds of damages claims. But this government has decided not to even do that.
Advocate Dali Mpofu, thank you so much for your time this morning. We appreciate you taking time out to talk to us.